With me today is Congressman Brian Higgins, New York District 26. Congressman Higgins has been a stalwart voice and supporter for the border issues and was instrumental and center to the U.S. border opening decision, and we welcome him here today. Representing border cities in the U.S. and Canada, we have Mayor Robert Restaino, Niagara Falls, New York, Mayor Jim Diodati, Niagara Falls, Ontario, Mayor Michael Bradley, Sarnia, Ontario, and Mayor Drew Dilkens, Windsor, Ontario. And representing highly affected border city businesses, we have Susie Grynol, President and CEO of the Hotel Association of Canada, representing hotels, motels, and resorts in Canada, who has been a strong advocacy voice for the hardest hit businesses during the pandemic. And myself, representing the land border duty-free stores, small, independently owned, local retail businesses across Canada that are an integral part of our border town communities and the tourism industry in Canada. I welcome and thank you all for being here today. I know I speak for all of us. Actually, Philippe, please go ahead and repeat in French.
Merci, Barbara. Bonjour, nous aimerions vous remercier tous les médias qui se joignent à nous ce matin. Je suis Philippe Bachand, membre du conseil d'administration de l'association Frontières hors taxes et président de la boutique hors taxes de Phillipsburg au Québec. Pour débuter, nous aimerions reconnaître que cette conférence de presse virtuelle avec des participants partout au pays se déroule en territoire autochtone qui n'ont jamais été cédés. Nos communautés sont des lieux de rassemblement pour de nombreuses Premières Nations et aujourd'hui une population autochtone diversifiée, ainsi que d'autres peuples y résident. Dans le respect des liens avec le passé, le présent et l'avenir, que nous reconnaissons les relations continues entre les peuples autochtones et d'autres personnes de nos communautés. Éclaircissons quelques points pour commencer. Pendant cette conférence de presse, nous accepterons que les questions venant des médias et nous demandons aux médias de lever la main s'ils ont une question à poser. Madame Barrett va vous appeler dans l'ordre et vous pouvez diriger votre question à un présentateur de votre choix. Si le temps nous le permet, vous serez invité à compléter votre question. Au besoin, je pourrais aider avec les questions en français. Et maintenant, commençons. Nous avons avec nous aujourd'hui Congressman Brian Higgins de l'État de New York. Congressman Higgins a été un vigoureux porte-parole et un grand supporter de la cause frontalière. Il est au centre de la prise de décision de rouvrir la frontière du côté américain. Nous lui souhaitons la bienvenue. Représentant des villes frontalières américaines et canadiennes, nous avons M. le maire Robert Restaino de Niagara, New York, M. le maire Jim Diodati de Niagara, Ontario, M. le maire Michael Bradley de Sarnia, Ontario, et M. le maire Drew Dilkens de Windsor, Ontario. Et représentant des entreprises très affectées des villes frontalières, Mme Susie Grynol, présidente de l'Association des hôtels du Canada, qui représente des hôtels, motels et resorts du Canada. Elle a fortement plaidé en faveur des entreprises les plus durement touchées pendant la pandémie. Et aussi avec nous, Mme Barbara Barrett, directrice générale de l'Association Frontières hors taxes, représentant les boutiques hors taxes frontalières, de petites entreprises indépendantes et locales réparties partout au travers du Canada, qui font partie intégrante des communautés frontalières et de l'industrie touristique canadienne. Nous vous souhaitons la bienvenue et vous remercions d'être ici aujourd'hui. Barbara.
Merci, Philippe. I know I speak for all of us when I say we are thrilled that today marks the day when the United States will finally be welcoming its Canadian neighbors back over the border. We celebrate that and look forward to that natural flow of traffic over the border that is so vital to border communities. But the unnecessary PCR test requirement for travelers crossing into Canada continues to be a barrier to this happening. And today, this group is calling on the Canadian federal government to drop the PCR test requirement. I now invite Congressman Brian Higgins to make comment.
Thank you very much, Barbara. Thank you for everyone that's gathered, particularly the four mayors. As a guy that came from the Buffalo City Council, I've always believed mayors to be at the epicenter of solving problems for people. And these four individuals over the past several months have been stalwarts in assisting in our efforts to get both the U.S. and Canadian governments to do the right thing on behalf of our mutual citizens. I was a kid that played ice hockey up in Canada. I spent more summers in Canada than I did in Buffalo. Our economies in Western New York and Southern Ontario in particular have been integrated. Our life qualities are integrated. Today marks the day that loved ones who have been separated for the past 19 months will finally be reunited. That is very, very significant. This border opening should have occurred 6 months ago. The United States and the Canadian government failed their people in developing a consistent communication strategy relating to the very thing that all of us have been admonished to do, and that is follow the science, follow the facts, follow the data. And when you do, there is one clear conclusion. If you are fully vaccinated, you reduce the spread and severity of COVID. And those who did the right thing, both Canadian citizens and US citizens, on behalf of themselves, on behalf of their families, on behalf of their immediate neighbors and their binational neighbors, should be able to cross the border once they certify, once they confirm that in fact they have been vaccinated. At 2:30 this morning, there was a 2.5-hour wait on the Peace Bridge of Canadian citizens coming into Western New York. By 8 o'clock this morning, that was reduced to about 38 minutes. The bridge, Ron Rhinus, the Peace Bridge, and the other managers of the 3 remaining bridges in Western New York have done a very good job in preparing for this day. We will see significant uptick in economic activity, but we're still doing it with one hand tied behind our back with this redundant, unnecessary testing requirement. Finally, we need to celebrate the extraordinary achievement of RNA technology. It's the genetic material that tells a cell to make a protein, which is the active ingredient in a vaccine. Biomedical researchers had hoped to achieve about a 60% efficacy rate when they went into this. They're achieving efficacy rates, both safety and efficacy, of 85, 90, 95%. That needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be recognized, and that needs to be celebrated in a binational way so that we can really get back to a sense of normalcy. Pre-pandemic, 2019, 21 million Canadians traveled to the United States in that year, and they spent $21 billion. We have lost much of that during this pandemic. People don't want to be constrained anymore. So recognize the power of the vaccines for what it is. It is a powerful tool against getting COVID or getting COVID. Remove the redundant testing, and let's really celebrate this opening so that we can realize the full potential of the United States and Canada getting back to its friendship, getting back to its binational relationship in an economic way, but also in a life quality way, and celebrating the great binational relationship that Americans and Canadians have shared for many, many years. I thank all of you for the work that you have done. And the lesson that we've learned from all of this is bureaucracies are very hard to change, but if you go away, they win. So if you persist using the data that you've been given by the respective bureaucracies as the inflection point, the game-changing moment, things can in fact change. So we still have work to do, but this is a day to be celebrated. And I thank all of you for the great work that you have done during the past 19 months.
Mayor Restaino?
Thank you, Barbara. And I joined the congressman in, this is a day to celebrate. I spent the weekend walking around, driving around and talking to retail establishments and restaurants here in Niagara Falls, New York. And I can't tell you, the excitement was palpable with all of them. They realize what this is going to mean to their respective businesses as we sort of move into the holiday season. They're very excited about it. The numbers that the congressman has provided really tell the entire story. I do believe that as long as we continue with this last wrinkle, we won't see the full appreciation of just how much the communities on both sides of this river really do count on one another. I'm hoping that some sensibility will be made from all of this, and that not only will we celebrate today, but in the short term, we'll be able to get back to the way it was back, as the congressman said, 2019, when we were able to enjoy free passage both ways, to see family, to see friends, to enjoy those places that really make living in a border community something that's truly unique and exciting.
Thank you, Mayor. And now from the Canadian side of the Falls, and we won't argue whether it's the better side or not right now, I invite Mayor Jim Diodati to make remarks.
Thanks, Barbara. And I think Mayor Restaino, we understand and we see it the same way. Niagara Falls is one big city divided by a border. And what a lot of people don't understand is how it affects border communities, because there's family on both sides, friends on both sides, favorite restaurants, attractions, hotels, shopping. Just imagine wherever you live right now, if half of your town was cut off for the next 2 years, you are not allowed to cross into that area. Just imagine how that would affect you psychologically, emotionally. It's had a huge impact on us here. And in terms of tourism, obviously, we understand tourism to be very important. And some people said you need to diversify your economy. Well, I agree, but it's very hard when you're right next to one of the great natural wonders of the world. We like to say the Coca-Cola of municipalities. It's one of the biggest brands on the planet. And imagine right now if tourism just stopped tomorrow, and that's exactly what happened. And I've spoken with many people who in tourism, we've been through a lot of things, and resilience is part of our DNA. We've been through 9/11, H1N1, SARS, mad cow, currency fluctuations, among many other challenges, but we always bounce back. This one seems to be induced by us, and it's preventable by us. We've got a chance, as Congressman Higgins said, we can undo some of the harm that we've done by removing a redundant test that doesn't make us any safer. It just adds costs and encumbers people's visits. The majority of people that come here come by rubber tire. We're within a day's drive of almost half the population of North America. And when you tell a family it's going to cost you another $1,000 to visit this and you won't have any more to eat or a nicer place to stay, they choose not to. They're a lot like water. They take the path of least resistance. And here in Niagara Falls, during the summer, we opened up to our American guests, and as kids, we used to play a game. And the game was, see how many plates you can see from different states and provinces. Well, we don't do that with my kids because there aren't any other plates. There's a handful of New York plates, and it's really sad. And we're excited on one hand that the trajectory is going in the right direction. We're finally about to open up, but to make it truly open, we need to remove this senseless PCR test. The molecular test does nothing to make things safer. It doesn't help anybody. It can't happen fast enough. And again, we'll have the free flow of goods, services, people, and tourism along the world's longest unmilitarized border, something we're so proud of. And I cannot wait to join Mayor Restaino at his restaurant of choice, where we can have some traditional buffalo wings, pizza, and maybe a beverage or two as well. So I can't wait. That'll be the first thing I'm going to do when things get opened up. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mayor Diodati, and we'll hand it over to Mayor Michael Bradley. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Barbara. First of all, it's Mike. The only time I ever hear the name Michael is when my mother was yelling at me in a very, very strong tone. I welcome joining this group here. One of the things in Sarnia Point we're looking forward to is we can finally, after 2 years, go to Detroit and see the Lions lose in person instead of having to watch them lose on TV. So this is a huge breakthrough for us. But on the serious side, all the mayors have been dealing with the humanitarian considerations. Yes, there's economic and there's social considerations. It's the heart-rending stories of people that wanted to cross the border to be at times of tragedy, at times of celebration. And the only thing that's going to be an impediment in the months ahead, unless the federal government on November 21st changes the rule, is the testing. For a family of four, $1,000 to go across to share with your family, that's the issue from my point of view, that we need that testing. The Medical Officer of Health for Canada made it clear that they're looking and reviewing that. To me, which is Ottawa speak for, we're getting a lot of pressure. We're not getting any validation, and this is an effective form of testing, and it is financially very difficult on people crossing land borders. So I'm hoping that this media conference today and the support of our American friends, which has been fantastic in the last number of months, will lead to the government in Ottawa saying the testing is not needed, and we're going to end it on November 21st.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor Drew Dilkens, please.
Thank you very much, Barbara. And I certainly echo many of the comments made by my colleagues across the province and in New York State. And today is a good day. Now that the U.S. border is reopened to non-essential traffic, I can tell you there's an air of excitement in my city as the border reopens, the likes of which we haven't seen or felt in 20 months. You know, Canada and the United States have tightly connected supply chains on the business side. As the auto capital of Canada, I can tell you that the average part placed into a vehicle that rolls off the final assembly line crosses the border about 6 times. There are literally hundreds of thousands of Canadian and American jobs that rely on smooth and efficient access to either country to help keep our economies rolling. And the tightly knit nature of our business supply chains also represents the close family relationships that are built on both sides of the border, families that have been separated for 20 months during all of the major life events, events of celebration and events of mourning. And so now there's a pathway to cross. Yet that pathway is dampened by an unreasonable and costly requirement for a PCR test to return to Canada. And this PCR test requirement is a hard stop barrier for families to reunite, except for the wealthiest of Canadians, and that is unfair. More than being unfair, the system in place allows Canadians who can afford the $200 per person test fee to take the test before leaving Canada for use within 72 hours when returning to Canada. And it has nothing to do with the science. And let me give you an example. Mike talked about the Lions. One of the biggest football events locally is the annual Detroit Lions Thanksgiving Day game. Thousands of Canadians cross into Detroit every year to watch this game and participate in pre and post game activities. And the current system would allow someone to take a PCR test in Canada, cross into Detroit to cheer on the Lions with 65,000 other fans in the stadium, and then return to Canada using the test they took before leaving. And so how is that test of any use to anyone about the nature of one's activities and the risk that they were exposed to? And I think we can all agree it's not. And so even if you took a PCR test in the United States after watching the game, every scientist will tell you that it takes days after exposure before COVID presents itself through testing. So the reopening of the border is certainly a good thing. It will help push thousands of unvaccinated Canadians and Americans to get vaccinated so that they can once again travel and see family. And when following science and data, this is certainly a good thing because the vast majority of those who are severely ill with COVID-19 are currently unvaccinated. We need to figure out how to manage the risk of COVID without putting undue restrictions on Canadians, for the virus will be with us for many years to come. Barbara?
Many thanks, Mayor Dilkens. And to make comment on how this is affecting businesses, particularly those in the tourism industry, I invite Susie Grynol of the Hotel Association of Canada to remark. Susie?
Thank you. Good morning. I'm speaking today on behalf of thousands of businesses and hundreds of thousands of employees in the tourism, hospitality, and accommodation sector. All leaders here today know that tourism, hotels, and events businesses have faced devastating financial losses due to COVID and the land border closure. So today is a good news day. Today, fully vaccinated Canadians can enter the U.S. and no further testing is required upon arrival. The course is clear. The Centre for Disease Control assessed the risk of COVID transmission from fully vaccinated travelers and advised that no additional test would be required. But the same, unfortunately, is not true in Canada. If fully vaccinated Americans come into Canada, they must undergo an additional expensive and sometimes inaccessible test, the PCR test. Similarly, fully vaccinated Canadians re-entering Canada must also undergo this same test. So today we're asking, if the science is the science, then why do we have 2 different sets of rules on either side of the border? We know that the Canadian government has placed great faith in vaccinations. Full vaccination is required for interprovincial air travel, train travel, and for federally regulated employment. Provincial governments are also relying on the vaccinations as a protocol to provide healthcare services or to attend a mass gathering. The government's own expert advisory panel on the border also concluded that double vaccinated travelers don't need a PCR test at arrival. I hear it every day from my members. The PCR test is blocking travel. Whether you're trying to visit family in Canada over the Christmas is just a couple of weeks away, or traveling for business, or you're a global account looking to book an international convention, many are taking a pass on Canada because the process is complicated and expensive. It is urgent that the Canadian government complete its examination of this policy. Every day that this inconsistent policy stands, our industry falls further behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Susie. And thank you to all of our speakers today who are all united in this message. We will now open the floor to the media for questions. Again, please use the raise hand function and we will call you in order and unmute you. Do we have any open questions? Global News, Ottawa, please. Unmute. Thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? It's Michael.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, so I just wanted to sort of ask, I guess put it out to, one on each side, maybe Congressman Higgins and somebody else from the Canadian side. Canada has had this sort of go slow approach, trying to make sure that they take the time that's necessary to get it right. And it seems like they continue to try and do this now. Is this going too slow, in your opinion, though, when you consider that prudence has always been sort of the hallmark of trying to manage this COVID-19 pandemic?
Well, as it relates to the testing requirement, yes. I mean, as I had mentioned previously, fully vaccinated US and Canadian citizens should have been crossing the border 6 months ago. Essential travelers were traveling every single day during the pandemic across the border without vaccination. So there's just a lot of inconsistency, which has led to a high level of frustration. And when I met with the Canadian ambassador to the United States, Kristen Hillman, who is a consummate diplomatic professional, just how do you reconcile the inconsistencies here? As has been said, vaccines are free, they're easily accessible, and it's not an unpleasant experience. Testing is expensive, it's inconvenient, and it's a highly unpleasant experience, and it is unnecessary. We are all economic actors. When we're confident, we move. When we're not, we don't. And I will bet you today that there are a lot of conversations taking place in Fort Erie, Ontario, between couples, between families that are saying to themselves, boy, we would love to make that cross-border trip to Buffalo. But there's a pause because of the testing requirement. And again, no good scientific reason has been advanced for that. So I just think that, the United States and Canadian governments could have, should have been better coordinated, and every message that came out as it relates to that border should have been a joint statement. And if it wasn't going to open 1 month, people should have been made aware of what was occurring to ensure that that border opens relative to the cooperation that was going on. This was, grossly mismanaged generally, but there's fault on both sides of the border and both federal governments. But when the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention says, if you are fully vaccinated, you can return to most pre-pandemic activity. To us, all of us, that includes being able to cross the border without constraints so long as you are fully vaccinated.
Do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to ask you, what was that conversation like with Ambassador Hillman? What did she say when you raised the issue and how slow it's going?
It was in Washington at the Canadian Embassy. I've been there many, many times and been on the, in conversations with the Canadian ambassador to the United States and the US ambassador to Canada. Very, very professional, a commitment to convey these concerns to the federal government leaders in Canada.
Thank you. Next, we have Camille Griwa.
Yes, hi there. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Bonjour, ce serait une question en français. pour monsieur, je ne sais pas qui la prend, monsieur Bachon, peut-être madame Grynol, mais simplement réexpliquer en français pourquoi, selon vous, l'exigence de tests reste un obstacle à la circulation des gens des deux côtés de la frontière.
Ben, l'exigence du test, d'après nous, c'est surtout du côté économique. Quand une famille canadienne va aux États-Unis pour le retour, vous devez avoir des tests PCR qui sont très dispendieux. Pour une famille de 4 personnes, on peut parler de 800 $. On peut parler aussi que les gens qui sont maintenant pleinement vaccinés peuvent aller voir la partie de hockey au Centre Bell avec 18 000 personnes sans test PCR. On croit que le test n'est plus logique maintenant, que les gens qui traversent la frontière ont le double vaccin et c'est notre demande actuellement.
Que follow-up, Camille?
Est-ce que vous pensez que le fait que vous soyez tous rassemblés ici aujourd'hui, un message uni, ça va peut-être aider votre cause?
Ben, ici, vous avez des maires de communautés frontalières. Vous avez Mme Grynol, qui est la présidente de l'Association des hôtels. Moi, je suis sur le comité de l'Association des boutiques hors taxes canadiennes. Ce sont tous des communautés ou des entreprises qui ont été très, très, très affectées pendant les 20 derniers mois. Et je crois que nous avons un message fort et pertinent que nous devons être entendus. Et la frontière est maintenant réouverte. C'est une très bonne nouvelle, mais nous voulons permettre à tout le monde d'avoir le droit de traverser la frontière.
Madame Roy, on espère que oui.
Merci.
Global News, I see you have your hand up again. Did you have another question? Unmute.
Thank you. Yeah, and just to sort of follow up on what one of my colleagues said, I mean, you're all speaking with a united voice here, but you also have been for some time now. What hope do you have that this will actually do something to change the federal government's mind on the PCR testing?
Go ahead, Mayor Bradley.
Well, I think the answer is quite simple. This past week, Dr. Tam said that they were reviewing the testing, which for those of us that know Ottawa speak is a clear signal the federal government is looking at this seriously and they're seeing the economic and social impact. So we have another date coming up. November 21st is when they have to renew the regulations. And if they wish to change this, that would be the time to do it. It's perfect timing for what goes on between the two countries. And it would give the federal government a chance to say, we've listened to people across the country. Now, if I can make one more point, that when we went into this, we went in there just as we did at 9/11, closing the border, we went in together. And somewhere along the way, the federal government in Canada lost the narrative when they reopened the border for Americans in July, but didn't get reciprocal treatment. And so what I hope will happen now, when they know that we're one of the few countries still doing this testing, which is, hard on people financially, hard on them mentally, that here's a chance to exit with no criticism coming from this group. In fact, a lot of support.
Thank you, Mayor. Sija Liu, CTV Windsor, please.
Hi, good morning. Thank you for doing this press conference. Another barrier that some families have reported is the fact that young children who are ineligible for the vaccine still have to quarantine when they come back into Canada. Do you have any comments on this requirement for reentry? I know the United States on their end, they are providing an exemption for anyone under 18.
Would like to take that. Mayor Diodati?
I thought my counterpart in Windsor was going to jump all over the Windsor media.
You're welcome. Oh, yes.
But that's okay. I'm happy to jump in and then I'm sure he'll correct me. I agree with that. I think, especially given the fact that there's a low transmission rate amongst kids, they seem to be in a better place with their immune systems. I think it stands to reason. Our numbers are more than 85% fully vaccinated of those eligible in Canada, that I think we've done the right thing. And that's what we're told to do. The panacea is to get vaccinated. And I think our numbers show that we've been very successful at what we've been doing. It's already been very disruptive. And what I want to point out is sometimes you have such insular objectives that you create collateral damage, unintended outcomes. And one of them is the mental health, the financial health, the emotional strain. I mean, it's been very difficult. Can you imagine? You can take everyone except for your little child, or the children are not going to be exempted. So we've got to treat them differently. It's already too complicated. It's too cumbersome. This past summer, I traveled to Boston and Cape Cod, and it was a lot of work to get down there. It's a lot easier not to, unless you've got a strong reason to travel. We need to make it easy. We need to incentivize people. We want to incentivize people to get vaccinated, and then to incentivize them to travel again and spend their money. That's what we need, because as said earlier, we don't want people taking a pass on traveling to Canada, because that's exactly what they're doing right now. Europe is not using these PCR tests because they realize they don't serve a real function any longer. So absolutely agree with what they're doing in the US in terms of under 12 when you can't get vaccinated yet.
Mayor Dilkens?
Not too much to add, except to say that the United States is ahead of Canada with respect to the vaccination of 5 to 11-year-olds. And so Canada is not far behind on that front. And I think, just jumping on to what Mayor Diodati said, it would be useful to find what our government referred to as symmetry at the border early on in the discussion about the reopening of the border. And that comes with the discussion on PCR testing for different PCR testing in general, as well as a requirement for vaccination for different age groups.
You have a follow-up?
You had mentioned that the government is actively talking about removing this requirement, and that the target date for removal is November 21st. In your personal opinion, how confident are you that changes will happen by then?
You want to direct that? Sorry.
I'm happy to start here, Barbara, but I think it's fair to say that you have a united front here on this call and many other border city mayors across the country. And so we need, as I said at the end of my comments, we need to find a way in order to deal with COVID moving forward. We know this is going to be with us for many years to come. There are going to be some ups and downs, and we have to figure out how to mitigate some of the concern, and manage it and deal with it. But to try and make it risk-free for everyone, that will be an impossibility. And so there are all sorts of triggers that will get people vaccinated, which is the best protection we can offer to people today. That's, some of them are vaccine passports, some of them are workplace restrictions, some of them are travel restrictions in Canada. Going on an airplane or a train, you'll need to be vaccinated. And crossing the international border between the United States and Canada, there is a requirement to be fully vaccinated. That will be a trigger for thousands of Canadians and probably thousands of Americans as well. So we've got to figure out how to deal with this moving forward, because it's not going away, but keeping families apart, keeping business people away from one another in the interest of safety once they're fully vaccinated, I think is no longer tolerable.
Thank you. And I think we have one final question from Rebecca at Albany Times, or did you lower your hand?
No, I lowered my hand. It's okay. I think it's Elvin Zed. Thank you.
Thank you. So that concludes our press conference today. I thank all of the speakers for being here and relaying this important message. I thank all of the media also for being here today. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us if you have any further questions. Thank you, everybody.